What is up, NFL fans, and welcome back to another episode of The Way We See It. If you're watching us on YouTube, you're noticing Wesley Coleman is not with me. I'm Jeff Hartman. It's David Stefano, covers the Minnesota Vikings for Fans First Sports Network. Dave, what's up?
Hey, Jeff. Hey, it's what, Tuesday, Wednesday?
I don't
Tuesday.
know. I think it's Tuesday.
It's good. As you can see, I'm moving into my new digs, and I haven't got the studio fully set up yet, but it is a beautiful day here.
Yeah.
And hopefully for everybody that's watching or listening across the fruited plain and Europe, for that matter,
True.
that it's a absolutely wonderful day for you.
It is a wonderful day, and we have a lot to talk about. I want to talk about with some stuff specific with you, a Vikings fan. I want to talk about some of the news in the NFL as it pertains to your buddies, the Green Bay Packers, adjusting their proposals to the NFL for the tush push, all that stuff. But we want to start off talking about contracts. Contracts get dicey in the National Football League. There's so many different numbers. There's a lot of minutia with it. And a lot of times fans can get attached to just one total sum number, and they don't really look at, well, what does this mean per year? What does this mean in terms of where they rank amongst their position group? What about annual average salary? All those different things. And so there's been a lot of contracts. Nick Sirianni, he gets a new deal. Derrick Henry gets an extension with the Baltimore Ravens. Brock Purdy gets paid. Fred Warner gets a new contract. Let's start with Brock Purdy. It's something I talked about with Coach Kevin Smith yesterday on the NFL Whip Around. And I said there, and I'll say it again here, I thought it was fair. The guy has been to a Super Bowl, system quarterback, whatever you want. He deserves to get paid, but he didn't break the bank. What was your takeaway on that contract with Brock Purdy and the 49ers?
Fair is a very good representation of it. I'm happy with it because it slotted him. He didn't break the bank and get the highest paid ever quarterback
right
for doing nothing. He did get the team to a Super Bowl. He did have outstanding stats a couple of years ago when he did such. Now, you want to say, well, he's a system quarterback and he was surrounded by all those good players. Yeah, but somebody has to throw him the ball, and that was him.
Yeah.
So I thought it was good because it stuck him down, with Tua Tagovailoa and Jared Goff. So, Goff is doing well in Detroit. He got the Rams back to the Super Bowl way back. They deserve to be paid. But I think it's just perfect. There's still guys way ahead of them that have done nothing, i.e. Dak Prescott. But I think it's good. And I think NFL owners thought it was good because you could see them, rolling around going, hey, don't break the bank. Don't do it. Don't pay him over $60 million. Don't do it because you're going to throw the whole scale off for, good quarterbacks. And that goes into what's a good contract, what's a bad contract argument.
Well, let's talk about that. And I saw this Brandon Lee Gouton, who covers the Philadelphia Eagles. I used to work with him at SB Nation. He saw the Fred Warner contract and he compared it to Zach Vaughn. And Zach Vaughn obviously was re-signed by the Philadelphia Eagles. Here's what he writes. Fred Warner's annual value is $21 million. Zach Vaughn's annual value is $17 million. Bonds 2024, he played in 20 games, 184 tackles, 79 stops, 13 tackle for loss, 6 quarterback hits, 3.5 pass sacks, et cetera, et cetera. Warner's 2024 only played in 17 games, 131 tackles, 53 stops, 5 tackles for losses. In other words, there was a severe drop-off, not just because he played 3 less games in terms of overall talent. He continues, this is Brandon Lee Gouton talking. Warner obviously has the longer track record, but Bond will be closing that gap quickly if he can keep it up. So now we get into player comparisons. You say, okay, the Eagles are looking at the Warner deal and saying, man, we might have gotten ourselves a steal of a deal with Zach Vaughn in that contract. And that's why I've always said it's better to get out ahead of these things than to be reactive to them. You look at the pass rushers. TJ Watt's looking at Myles Garrett. He's looking at Max Crosby and saying, I'm better than both of those guys. I want to be paid accordingly. And the Steelers waited, and they're still waiting. And Trey Hendrickson's going to want a new deal and all this stuff. What do you look at in terms of, okay, you're evaluating a contract. We can even go back to Justin Jefferson, who was probably the last Viking to get a really, really big contract. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That or Christian Darrisaw.
Yeah, you're a good point. I forgot about Darisaw. So what do you look at when you're thinking, okay, they made this move. We like keeping the player because the player's productive and good. But when you're trying to think if it's a good or bad contract, what are some of the criteria that you look for personally?
Okay. First off, when the contract numbers come out, you've got to sit there and wait for the details. What do they actually mean? What's guaranteed? How many years are guaranteed? All that stuff. As a fan, you're looking at how it's structured to go, well, that's pretty good. We can get out. We may have signed Will Fries, the young guard from the Colts, and we paid him a whole bunch of money, but is it really a 5-year deal worth all
Right.
that money, or is it a 3-year deal we can get out with not paying a whole lot? And in the case for Will Fries, it was basically, it could be a 3-year deal. We don't pay him a whole lot, and if he's good and all that, then we pay him, and it's still a good value at that point. And so it's a good contract. JJ obviously is, my opinion, the best wide receiver in the NFL. He deserved the best wide receiver in the NFL money. He drives the sport. He changes how defenses play. So with him, paying him all that money, I thought it was a good value because he represents the team. He's the face of the team as of right now. Hopefully, JJ McCarthy will eventually take over that spot, but it's Justin Jefferson, and he's the face of the league. You see him everywhere. So it was a good investment. It will be brought back and, hopefully tenfold with the viewership and the fan base growing and all of that sort of deal. It was a good spend, and it wasn't an overspend like a certain quarterback that we guaranteed his contract when we got him.
Yeah.
That was a bad contract. And it set a
We'll get to
bad
the we'll
precedent.
get to the bad contracts. We'll get to the bad ones. But you gave some really good criteria for the good contracts. I think everyone thinks about Tom Brady, and I hate Tom Brady. And I've hated him for a very long time for a lot of reasons. And I'm not going to get into the fact that they were siphoning money to him through the TV 12 Foundation, but he was always the one that everyone's like, look at Tom. He's taking less money. Look at Tom. He's such a good guy. Well, there's ways that players can be accommodating to a team with their contract as it pertains to things like signing bonuses, as it pertains to where is the money landing. So they could say, "You look, I don't need all that money in the first 2 years. Backload it, and then we'll restructure it. You can manage it." That is a player saying, "I'm getting what I deserve, but I'm also helping out the organization by giving you the flexibility to manage the cap and make things work." Unless something catastrophic happens, the cap is going to continue to go up. And that's why even when you see like a Justin Jefferson contract, which at the time was holy crap, now you're like, I can't believe he's only getting this. These guys are getting Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are getting what? Like, and he's getting this. And eventually the jockeying for position. I think this, though, is bleeding into how contracts can go bad. And that is when players feel the desire to be the top paid at their position. Let's go back to TJ Watt. I think TJ Watt would be happy with just $1 more than Myles Garrett. If Myles Garrett got a 60 million guaranteed and $2, he would take 60 million and 3 just to shove it in his face that I'm making more than you. I'm better than you. That's just my own personal opinion. I have no insider information on that, but still, when players feel the need to be the top at their position or the top paid by annual average or the whatever, well, that can get dicey because now you're looking at how does an organization view them compared to how does the player view themselves and their representation. If a player doesn't have representation, look at Lamar Jackson. Those were some really interesting contract disputes between the organization and him. The agent is often the buffer between the team saying, look, like he's been hurt a lot, but now they're having to say that to his face. That can be interesting. But we all know that Deshaun Watson is the coup de grace of awful contracts, and he screwed the Browns, not him. I don't blame Deshaun Watson. It's not his fault. If someone offered me 260 million guaranteed, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Let's do this. It's the Browns that screwed the pooch. It's the Browns that screwed up the NFL for contract standpoints. What's your takeaway on some bad contracts, though, Dave?
Oh no, that you're right about that being the worst. That is and it's teams that do that. It's and I say teams, it's usually involved the ownership and the GM and the money guy that put together these bad contracts because why? They want them. And for the Browns, in the case of Deshaun Watson, it was supposedly the owner that insisted on it.
Yeah.
Okay. That's bad process. You should never do that. And we've seen teams that absolutely stink that deserve better management to do that. Was it Carolina, Jacksonville, different teams like that you can take? They'll give somebody a bad contract. I got Adam Thielen sitting behind me, right?
Yeah.
When he went to Carolina, he got paid as the number one wide receiver. Well, great for Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen's a great individual. I'm happy for him. But do you think that was a good contract for the Carolina Panthers? No, it wasn't, because they didn't have anything to go around and support and the whole works. So that, a bad contract usually comes out of bad process. And it's usually a lot of times owners wanting to make a big splash, wanting to bring back ends to the seats to put it could go with either a good player like Adam Thielen or a diva type player that you wonder about. Oh, should we get this guy? He's got talent, but he could be a problem later on, i.e. Deshaun Watson. But I always look at who's doing it and why, and does it make sense? Make sense to the normal fan. Now, a bunch of my fan base is like, oh, they paid Purdy too much. He's not worth that. And I'm like, what do you mean he's not worth that? He got the team to the Super Bowl. You remember when Daniel Jones got paid $40 million a year on average? And everybody said, you're crazy. Well, it turns out, guess what? They were crazy to do that. But it raised everything for all the quarterbacks, which, hey, it was going to happen anyways. But that was a bad contract, and the Giants got stuck with it. Just like the Atlanta Falcons paid $140 million to Kirk Cousins, and they've gotten stuck with it. You always want to be able to leave yourself an out. If they play the maximum, great, then it's worth it. But how many times do they not do that? Deshaun Watson, Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
That's it.
I will say the Vikings started this trend.
I know
with the Kirk Cousins contract, but Brock Purdy. Let's look at Brock Purdy's overall numbers. 5 years, $265 million, and that looks like an absurd amount of money. $53 million annually. Holy cow! $181 guaranteed. See, now that's the number that I look for when I see a contract. How much is guaranteed? So 265, only 181 is guaranteed dollars. Now, here's the next caveat. And here's where I think that it wasn't the Vikings that screwed everything up. It was the fact that football players were looking around at Major League Baseball and at the NBA, and they were saying, what are we doing? How in the hell is a sixth starter, seventh bench player in the NBA making almost as much, if not, and maybe not as much as the top players in the NFL, but their contracts are fully guaranteed? Major League Baseball, we're coming up on it. Bobby Bonilla Day is almost here, where Bobby Bonilla is still getting paid by the New York Mets for that unbelievable contract that he signed, and he still gets that check. I think it's coming to a close, but still, it's just remarkable how much money he's made because baseball contracts are fully guaranteed. You pay that contract, you will get every single penny, no matter what. And the NFL said, or the NFL Players Association, which rightfully so, so why are we so behind in the times? And then Kirk Cousins signs that. What was it? 80 million fully guaranteed?
86 million guaranteed, fully guaranteed for 3 years.
And so now for 3 years, I mean, you're looking at Brock Purdy getting a 5-year extension for 181, and you look at Deshaun Watson for 260. What's your takeaway on this? The NFL starting to kind of bleed into the other way contracts are being handled in other organizations?
Well, I think the way, like I said, it comes back to who's running it. If the they're giving more guaranteed money because the Players Association is pushing for that. Hopefully, they won't do 100% guarantee contracts. I've only seen, I think, one or two more since Kirk Cousins, and they're usually short term, and they hamstring the organization because they cannot adjust and say, hey, I need a left guard. Well, I need to go out and get a left guard. Well, he's going to cost $13 million a year or whatever. At the time, Kirk Cousins ish, somewhere in there. I can't afford it because so much of your salary's locked up in this year's cap. We're screwed. And so, but if they do it as they're doing now and saying, hey, we're giving you this much guaranteed, Purdy's 160, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then, but we've got it over a longer term period, and we might throw some void years at the end so that we can move money around and get that guard that you need to, finish off the offensive line and keep you protected and producing at a high level. That makes sense to me as a fan, and it should make sense to NFL organizations. And in the long run, if the player performs, it's good for the Players Association.
Yeah.
It's the ones that don't perform that hurts the whole process. Deshaun Watson, just one of many.
Well, and you bring up Adam Thielen's a good example as well. Like he is a good example of a player that was paid probably more than he should. You can't blame the player for accepting the contract. Like you can't. I know there's a lot of fans that hate Deshaun Watson, but it's not Deshaun Watson's fault. You blame the Browns. You blame the Browns. They're the ones that put it in front of him. I'm not going to get into golf, but it's like these live players that get paid. Like John Rahm got $400 million guaranteed. You blame Liv. Like John Rahm turning down that money would be asinine. That's generational wealth. That's neither here nor there. So let's wrap this thing up.
And I'm all for players getting paid what they can. They they're looking out for their families.
And it's a short shelf life. Their careers are very brief. And if you have guaranteed money, Brock Purdy 181, if he gets injured and it's a season career-ending injury, he's guaranteed that money. Good for him because it's going to set him up and his family for future. And so that's why when I think about injuries, career-ending injuries, I always go back to 2017 when Ryan Shazier suffered that horrible back injury, neck injury on Monday Night Football in Cincinnati. Paycor Stadium, what a hellhole that is. But anyways, he didn't get that next big contract. And so that's always been awful for him. Like he was right on the verge, he's spoken about it, of getting that contract, and he got hurt. That next offseason was when he was supposed to be negotiating his big deal. And so when I heard that, I was like, I'm never going to fault a player for taking the money. Take the bag and run as much as you can while you can. And if people get frustrated because they look at their paychecks and they're not the same, well, you don't run the 40 fast enough. That's
yes. And that's exactly it. It's a merit-based business.
Yeah.
Hey, we do podcasting now. Are we the top in the business? Are we Joe Rogan? No. He gets paid a lot more than we do. So
yeah, he does.
It is, but we do it for the love of it, and that's why we do it. And hopefully players do it for the love of it, and not all of them do. And they get paid for it. And if it's sad to hear about Shazier and how his career was cut short. Heck, go down to the Saints and Derek Carr, calling it quits. And it also goes by position. Each position lasts longer or shorter time period just because of the demands of the position. Running backs are trying to get their big payday earlier now because they're finding that if they do their first 4 years and under a rookie contract, they may be about done, coming up on that 30-year drop off the cliff mark. And they're making the argument, and they'll require a CBA change, that they get paid earlier. Whereas a lineman, they can go into their mid-30s just fine if they keep healthy. Quarterback, maybe, upper 30s, 40 if you're lucky. And it's all how many bites at the apple do you get?
Yeah. That's right. I honestly, like, we could go down a rabbit hole with this contract stuff. And now these new college players coming in after NIL money, we're not going to do that. That's another show altogether. Is how NIL. I feel like NIL is screwing up a lot of professional sports as it pertains to the contracts that they get and all that. But we're not going to dive into that. That's enough contract talk. You're a Vikings fan. I'm a Steelers fan. And we've talked a lot off air, obviously, about the Steelers and Vikings playing in Dublin. But I wanted to ask you, what is your take on the Vikings spending 2 weeks overseas? I saw that and was like, well, that's different. And what was as a Vikings fan, what's your takeaway from that?
Well, my takeaway is I can't wait because they're both away games for us. We're not losing a home game, and we're turning a tough game against you guys into a neutral field game. And even playing in Cleveland is tough. And we turn that into a neutral field game. So it's advantage Vikings on that one. Now, to go back to back, and then we're not the first time to do back to back games overseas. That distinction belongs to the Jacksonville
I was
Jaguars.
gonna say you're the first non-Jaguar team.
Yeah. But we're the first team to play in two separate countries.
Oh.
Back to back. Now, it's not really a big deal. They're in the same time zone. The distance from London to Dublin is less than Minneapolis to Chicago. It's a hop. Now, the logistics of it is interesting because how they're going to set that up. Are they going to fly everything and set it up in England, which I would suggest, and then just hop over to Dublin a couple days before, do all the press stuff, and then play the game, and then hop back to London, and you're good and golden. Our team has studied the travel portion of it. They can get the players all adjusted. They like them to sleep on the flight out, and then they get them all adjusted real well, and they do all the press stuff, and they get their workouts and all those things that's required. And because they bring everything. Right. They bring the cooks. They bring the weight rooms. They bring all that stuff comes with them. All the cleats, right? The big deal is cleats. You got to bring, judging on how the grass conditions are or the turf conditions. In the case of Tottenham Spur Stadium, it's all brought over. But what was interesting is I found out the Vikings volunteered for it.
Really?
They were asked by the NFL, would you like to stay over there and play the Browns the next week? Yeah, we wanted to play the Steelers. There's so many historic references of Irish versus Vikings, and Dublin is founded by Vikings and the whole works. That's going to be a no-brainer. We're going to do that. But they asked, would you like to stay a second week and play the Browns? Which makes me wonder about the Browns, but okay, sure, we will. Because the Wilfs, our overseas marketing area is Great Britain and Northern Europe. I heard you talking this morning about how you going to Italy, you don't see many places that love football, but you get into Germany and Austria and everywhere else, and everybody's talking about. Kevin was talking about this,
yeah,
and it's true. I've got a German correspondent that does my post game shows because he loves football so much. There's a Vikings Germany. There's a Vikings England. There's all sorts of stuff that I interact with daily. They love it over there. And the Wilfs, because that's our area of expansion there in Canada, love bringing what the fans want. And last year when we were there, where we were the prime team, the home team, and had the home pub and the whole, it's wonderful. It brings in more money, more fans. It's a benefit. And I think they see it as that. That's why they said, oh, yes, we will.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. The Croke Park game, Steelers Vikings, will be a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
The last time these two teams met overseas was 2013. and that was in London. I don't want to. That was a horrible game. Greg Jennings, of all people, Greg Jennings with the game winning touchdown. What would be the game winning touchdown? Yeah, that was. I don't want to bring that up. Stop talking about it, Jeff. That was an 0-4 start of 2013 for the Steelers, but nonetheless, yeah. So that's going to be interesting. The international series. I want to get your take, though. I know you love the Packers, and at the time we're recording this podcast, it was released that the Packers have adjusted their proposal. Now, by the time this is actually released on Wednesday morning, it could have been already passed or denied by the NFL. What's your take on their proposal for the tush push to be banned? Because it was adjusted and they tweaked it a little bit. They actually listened to me. They must have. I was the one that said, don't just eliminate the tush push play. Say that you can't push any person forward. And I think that's in the best interest of all parties. But they've adjusted. What's your takeaway on that?
Well, the tush push is, I'm a little bit more old school. It is a play. It's a more rugby scrum than pure football, but find a way to beat it. It's the simple fact. Just because you can't beat it and you got beaten by it by Philadelphia, find a way to beat it. Hey, and Philadelphia isn't the only one that did it. The Buffalo Bills is also known for doing a tush push. There are ways to defeat it. Now, there's where the argument comes in. Those ways were made illegal on the defensive side of doing that. So is it fair that the offense can do it and the defense can't? Well, NFL's gone pro offense for a long time, where, they protect the wide receivers now and they protect the quarterbacks, where you got to gently caress them and lay them down to get not a roughing call on the quarterback. It's all, I think it's just Packers being whiny that they got defeated with the tush push. Now, if you want to make it fair, allow the defense to get more aggressive, sure, fine. But you have to find a way to defeat it. I don't want to see it go away. I think it's a good tool, and I don't mind it. Hey, I grew up a lineman in my playing days, and you get mano a mano, or all of us pushing in the same direction. I think it's wonderful, but it is what it is. They're going to pass it. They're going to ban the tush push.
Yeah, probably. I don't care either way, to be honest with you. If I do like the proposal that they've amended, because I think it was smart. You can't just say we're eliminating this play. Just eliminate pushing. You can't push someone anywhere forward. And I remember there was a play last year or something where Najee Harris got kind of picked up and carried. Like, what are we doing? This isn't football now. Like, you're just carrying a teammate around. So what about the other proposal, which is still going to be heard? And that is all about reseeding of the playoffs. Now, before I get your answer, I saw someone on social media who's a Pittsburgh Steelers beat writer. He said, if you're going to do this, then why have divisions? Like, what's the purpose? Why don't we just have the NFC, AFC, and it's just one big standing, and you have the winning percentage in the top so many teams, you're in, and the top seeded team plays the lower seeded team. And as I thought about that, I was like, well, outside of just creating a schedule, that's not a bad idea if you're going to go down that road. What's your takeaway on the reseeding process? Do you think that's going to fly?
Well, obviously it was suggested because of what happened to the Minnesota Vikings last year.
Sure.
Ending up 14-3 and then going down and playing the AFC.
But it was Detroit that proposed this, wasn't it?
I know, which was,
it wasn't Minnesota.
It was shocking to us that they proposed it, but it's for that exact reason why it was proposed. Now, me being a traditionalist, I agree with what you heard, that just get rid of the divisions. The NFC North means a whole lot to me. I have the team I hate and the other two teams I tolerate as a Vikings fan. There is the rivalries there have gone back since the inception. You have Bears Packers that are literally, that's over 100 years old. You have the Lions and their struggles over time. You have Vikings who started in the early 60s and how that became a rivalry between Chicago and Green Bay. Again, the Lions struggled over all those years. And we're happy for them for their success recently. But that's enough, Detroit. That's enough. But you're going to lose that. Now, when you get to the scheduling part, if you want to do the whole percentage thing of winning percentages, it would be then unfair to play the same team twice.
Yeah.
Because you have how many teams? 16 teams in each conference. Yeah. So you have 17 games now going to 18th. You make that 17 and 18 with wherever ranks the way they do now, your extra game on the opposite conference, and you play everybody else. Or guys, you play 15 games. So you play everybody else. So everybody plays the Green Bay Packers. Everybody in the NFC plays the Vikings. Everybody plays the Packers, plays the Bears, plays the Lions, plays any, Dallas Cowboys, pick your team. All NFC plays all NFC. And those extra games, 2 or 3 extra games, will be cross-conference.
Right.
They'll be AFC teams. That's where we'll beat you in Dublin or whatever it is. So, and you lose the rivalry at that point, because what does it matter? The divisions were originally put in there for travel purposes. They went by bus. It was a bus ride from Minnesota to Chicago or Minnesota to Green Bay. Now we're all modern airfare. They've got each team charters out big airplanes and usually multiple airplanes, and they fly their teams everywhere they need to go. Do we still need that the question is, do we still value that local border battles like we did before? Do you care as much? If you just go to full seeding, that local rivalry stuff will eventually fade. And to me, that's a shame, because I like that. I like not liking certain teams just because of their proximity, and I play them twice a year.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. The AFC North is very akin to the NFC North. Mm-hmm. I mean, could you imagine the Steelers and Ravens not being like a thing?
I know.
Every year. I mean,
that's a must-watch game for me, because you guys love beating up on each other. I love those games.
Yes. It's going to be interesting to see what the NFL does here. I do not expect them to change anything. Do you agree or disagree?
I'm hearing they're leaning towards changing it.
Oh, wow. That'd be drastic. So we'll have to see what else comes to that. But all right, David, I know that I want to get you out of here. We were going to talk about some grilling tips, but I don't know if we have time for that. So I'll give you an opportunity to plug your stuff at Vikings First and Skol and social media handles and all that stuff.
Well, as Jeff just said, we broadcast over at Vikings First and Skol on YouTube. We also podcast with Fans First Sports Network. We just had a show come out this morning with 2 old bloggers, which is me and Darren, 2 old bloggers. We've been in the business commenting about the Minnesota Vikings for over 2.5 decades apiece. It's been a long time. We started back when it was just blogs in the late 90s. But we give a more long, deep dive look into things, normally with graphics on our show. We have Tyler Fornes, the real Forno, who's one of our beat reporters. And then we have Sal Spice, who does a Vikings cultural show, which is cool. It's a good blend of stuff that we talk about. You can also find us over at Fans First Sports, the website. Just click the Vikings tab, and you'll find our latest writings and musings over there. I got an extra one coming out tomorrow morning about J.J. McCarthy in more detail about what he's going to expect this season, because it's going to be a crucible for him and what it means for him coming in with the expectations of taking a previously 14-3 team to make it back to the playoffs and win some playoffs this year. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
But
Make
that's
sure
where
you
you
check.
can,
Yeah. Check them out. Go to Fans First or ffsn.com and you can check out the Vikings tab. You'll find the Vikings First in School podcast feed, as well as all the writings that you mentioned. You can check out my Steelers coverage at steelcurtainnetwork.com or just Steel Curtain Network, wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube, all the platforms are there. But that does it. Dave, thanks for filling in. Hopefully Wesley will be back next week. I appreciate your time. This is another episode. We'll see you next week on another episode of The Way We See It. Take it easy, everyone.